Hey friends, welcome back. Today we arrive at one of the most fascinating letters in the book. We're talking about love again, but this one isn't really about romance. It's not even primarily about marriage. It's about something much deeper. Lewis makes an astonishing point. Satan literally cannot understand love. Not that he hates it, not that he rejects it. He genuinely cannot comprehend it. And that inability explains far more than just temptation. It helps explain Satan's rebellion, his hatred of humanity, and why hell consistently misunderstands God himself. Let's get into it. The letter begins with Screwtape acknowledging that he has mistakenly led Wormwood to believe that God actually loves human beings, as if love, in the way God describes it, is actually possible. He recognizes that Wormwood has come to this understanding because he's accidentally said things like, he truly loves the little vermin. He corrects himself and calls it heresy, then tries to explain it away. Why? Because from hell's perspective, real love is impossible. And his logic is surprisingly simple. If everyone is competing for his own interests, then nobody could genuinely seek another person's good. Every relationship must ultimately be self-serving. Someone always wants something, someone always benefits, someone is always manipulating. If that's true, then God's love is impossible. The good of human beings cannot truly be God's good as well, so God must have some hidden motive. He has to. There must be some secret reason he created mankind, some benefit he receives, some selfish objective he's hiding. Screwtape simply cannot imagine any other explanation. Lewis then gives us one of his most imaginative glimpses into Satan's fall. This isn't meant as a literal history lesson. It's Lewis imagining what pride would sound like. Before Satan fell, Lewis pictures him demanding an explanation from God. Why do you care about these creatures? What do you gain from loving them? God explains, he loves because he chooses to love. His love is completely disinterested. Now that's an old-fashioned word and it's easy to misunderstand. Lewis isn't saying God is disinterested as in uninterested or doesn't care. It's quite the opposite. He means God's love is without self-interest. God seeks our good, not because he needs us or something from us, not because he gains anything from us, not because he's manipulating us, but simply because that is his nature. He loves for our benefit, not his own. To Satan, that explanation sounds ridiculous. Lewis says Satan considered it a cock and bull story. His pride simply wouldn't allow him to believe such a thing existed. Notice something beautiful here. God wanted Satan to understand. He genuinely desired it. God wasn't hiding anything. He wasn't playing any games. He was freely offering the truth. Love cannot be coerced. Even the highest angel was free to reject it. That in itself is another demonstration of free will. God doesn't force belief. He reveals himself and allows his creatures to respond. Satan responded with pride. Unable to comprehend disinterested love, he concluded the only remaining possibility. God must be lying. Lewis then makes another fascinating observation. Scripture tells us Satan was cast out of heaven, but Screwtape suggests that hell tells a different story. In hell's version, Satan wasn't cast out. He left because he believed God to be a liar. Even after all this time, hell still believes God is deceiving everyone. Not because they've found evidence, but because they cannot imagine that goodness like his is real. Screwtape says they have spent ages developing theory after theory trying to expose God's hidden agenda. Every hypothesis fails, every theory collapses. Yet instead of questioning their assumptions, they simply invent another one. Maybe this explanation wasn't sophisticated enough. Maybe we need more evidence. Maybe next time we'll discover the secret. They believe that God's throne depends upon some hidden lie. They're convinced that one day they'll expose it. Lewis is describing something incredibly important. Pride doesn't merely reject truth. Pride makes truth incomprehensible. When your worldview assumes everyone is selfish, true selfless love becomes impossible to recognize. As the Gospel of John says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Or as many translations render it, the darkness did not comprehend it. That may be one of the best summaries of hell Lewis ever writes. This misunderstanding has enormous consequences. Screwtape tells Wormwood something incredibly ironic. It actually doesn't matter whether the patient believes love is good or bad. The same is true of patriotism, celibacy, sobriety, education. The subject hardly matters. What matters is getting someone to hold their opinion with pride. Push him toward one extreme. Let him become absolutely convinced he's right. Then, once he's built his identity around that position, use that very position against him. Hell doesn't care which ditch you drive into, as long as you miss the road. Lewis then gives 3 brilliant examples. First, he says, suppose your patient decides that romantic love is wonderful. Great. Encourage it. But don't let him love it as one gift among many. Convince him that romantic love is the highest good, that it should never be questioned, never be restrained, never even be submitted to God's wisdom. If he comes to believe that being in love is the supreme authority, you've already won half the battle. Because once love becomes an idol, it will eventually demand that he sacrifice truth, obedience, and wisdom on its altar. But maybe your patient is naturally squeamish. He despises physical desire. He mistakes his own discomfort for spiritual maturity. He secretly enjoys looking down on ordinary people who experience attraction. Perfect. In that case, convince him love itself is dirty. Push him toward an extreme, prideful self-denial. Separate sexuality completely from healthy human affection. Then, after years of repression, introduce temptation in its ugliest, most cynical form. The fall will be all the greater. Second, perhaps your patient is emotional, gullible, and lives in fantasy. Then feed him a steady diet of cheap romance novels, sentimental poetry, and unrealistic love stories. Teach him that being in love is automatically virtuous, that love is an irresistible force, that feelings justify every decision. Lewis says this won't necessarily produce casual immorality. It may accomplish something much worse. Long, dramatic, destructive affairs, ending, if all goes well, for hell, in murder or suicide. When feelings become your highest authority, tragedy isn't far behind. Third, and if none of that works, use marriage itself. Marriage is God's invention. It is good. It is holy. It is one of God's greatest gifts. But even something good can be twisted. Screwtape says surely there are a few young women in his neighborhood who would make living a faithful Christian life extraordinarily difficult for him. Convince him that because he's in love, he should ignore wisdom, ignore character, ignore spiritual compatibility, and marry anyway. The Bible calls this being unequally yoked. That image comes from farming. A yoke was a wooden beam placed across two oxen so they could pull a plow together. If one is pulling one way and the other another way, the work becomes exhausting and the field ends up a mess. Marriage is designed to unite two people who are walking toward the same Lord, helping one another become more like Christ. When those ultimate goals are different, the marriage itself becomes one of the greatest spiritual challenges a believer can face. And that's exactly what Screwtape wants in this situation. He doesn't need marriage to be bad. He doesn't need to destroy God's design. He simply wants to convince the Christian that being in love is more important than walking in the same direction. Hell doesn't need to convince you that marriage is evil. It only needs to convince you that your feelings matter more than your faith. And that brings us right back to Lewis's larger point. The issue isn't whether love is good or bad. The issue is what love is ordered toward. God's love always leads us toward holiness, but hell is content to let us call almost anything love so long as it leads us away from Christ. At the heart of this letter, Screwtape still believes love is nothing more than another tool God uses to manipulate people. He cannot imagine love existing simply for another person's good, and that's where Lewis leaves us. The greatest weakness of hell isn't merely wickedness, it's blindness. They cannot understand the very character of God. John tells us God is love, not that he possesses love, not that he occasionally acts lovingly. Love is his very nature. And because Satan rejected that nature, he now spends eternity trying to explain away the one thing he'll never understand. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness could not comprehend it. Next week in Letter 20, we'll see how the enemy uses culture to shape our desires, how movies, trends, and fantasies create unrealistic expectations about what we believe will make someone worth loving. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next week.